This is Let Your Voice Be Heard, right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
We are back on Let Your Voice Be Heard on 90.3 FM, WHCR, the voice of Harlem. And we are talking about the wage gap. Poor people want to get paid more money. They're so selfish.
They should. And if you're just tuning in, welcome to the show. My name is Selena Hill. I'm here with Stanley, Alyssa, and Jason. And if you guys want to chime into the show, you can tweet us at BeHeard_radio. And remember, you can call us up at 212-650-6903.
Got him.
Okay, so I have a question for you guys. How would you feel if you walked into your job Monday morning and your boss called for a meeting and he was like, guess what, guys? I'm taking a drastic pay cut. And you know what? Everyone is going to get a substantial pay increase. Some of you guys are even going to get double your salary simply because you work for me.
You're the real MVP. That's what I would say.
Would that be your response?
I would hug my boss. Well,
I was
actually
like,
sexual harassment, so I would not hug my boss.
No,
I would just say thank you.
I would be so happy about that.
It would make you want to work more. You would be more productive, right?
I'm not working more. I'm getting a raise right now.
Definitely. No, definitely. I would definitely want to work more and be more productive for that person, especially if they were taking into account that this is money I really need to live.
Right, exactly. And it would increase your morale at the office, and it would definitely change the work setting and the work culture. Yeah. And that's why I appreciate this 30-year-old millennial boss. His name is Dan Price in Seattle. And this is exactly what he did last Monday. He owns a company called Gravity Payments.
They hiring?
And you know what? So many people started applying after this video went viral. So he actually filmed himself talking to his 120 employees at the company and telling them everyone will start getting paid $70,000. Starting now, everyone's salary is going to jump to $50,000 if it's not there already. And then by 2017, you'll make $70,000. And you know what? My $1 million a year salary is getting cut to $50,000 this year, and then by 2017 I'll be making $70,000. I only have a dog. I'm single. I don't need all that money.
Okay, what do you want me to say?
I was looking at you.
He pulled a Warren Buffett. Okay, that's all. This guy, these millennials, this is all BS. This is crap.
What? But it's his money.
You don't agree?
That's
no,
the free market.
Jason, what do you think about this?
I'm gonna tell you what I think about that.
What do you think about that?
I think he's creating false perceptions for people. First of all, Warren Buffett did this stuff 50 years ago. He said, "I don't need that much money." He has set his salary at $250,000 for the last 30 years. He has a multi-billion-dollar company in Berkshire Hathaway. People are compensated very well. You can mix it, match it, package it however you want to. But once again, this is a private employer who's able, through his own largesse and charity, provide this service or provide this compensation for his workers.
So
it's not realistic for everyone else necessarily.
So what you're saying is trickle down doesn't work, right?
I'm not a believer in trickle down, so don't try to hit me with that.
No, I know, but I'm just, but that's really the key here. Even if you're not a believer, the idea of trickle down is the idea that if you give CEOs tax breaks and they have more money in their own pocket and their business makes more profits, then they will decide to trickle this money down to the employees.
Guys, I'm going to tell you what
right?
I do as a person.
So that's what he's doing. So and everybody's saying it's a bad idea. So everybody, mostly Republicans, maybe not you, mostly Republicans are saying this is a bad idea. So to me, that's Republicans admitting that trickle down doesn't work because it's a bad idea.
You're selfish, Alyssa, and Selena too. Let me tell you why. Because you know what? 2 years ago, I had a job at this big corporation. And one day, I saw my boss come up in a Mercedes-Benz. And I said, that's a beautiful car. And he goes, you know what? It is. And it's brand new. And if you work hard enough and apply yourself, I can buy a newer one next year. And that is why trickle-down economics works.
Everyone, that boss was not me. I had nothing to do with that.
It wasn't Jason.
It wasn't Jason. Be sure to say that.
Thank you for clarifying.
No. I mean, please clarify that for people. No. I do understand. I know this is all going to segue into the greater discussion of the wage debate. However, ultimately, as someone who has owned a business, as someone who's worked for people, I think that we are missing the point. We believe that by raising the wage to a certain degree, we're going to help people get out of poverty. That's not going to help people get out of poverty. And no, I'm not sticking up for trickle-down economics. But there's another way that we can go about that. But we can get into that.
I definitely want to get into that. I understand we have a caller on the line.
Yes, we do.
Who would like to let their voice be heard.
A Dallas Cowboys fan at that. So I'm not sure if I can put him on air.
Who's on the line?
Hey, y'all, it's Taman. How's it going?
Taman, hey, howdy, y'all. Well, Taman's in Texas now, so I want to give him a big old howdy.
And Taman can't find a good bagel.
Taman, how are you enjoying the black?
It's been driving me crazy. I do need a New York bagel, and I need to go to a New York deli, which has been driving me crazy.
How are you enjoying the blacks only water fountains?
Taman,
that's Indiana, not Texas.
Taman, I'm going to ship you a bagel, but you got to pay me 5 times what it's actually worth. Because that's the free market. That's the free market, right?
Give me one from A&S.
I got the supply, and it's in demand, so I can charge what I want for it, right?
You can do that.
So Taman, I know why you called in. I just wanted to let everyone know. So Taman actually tweeted us some really good comments. He says that minimum wage will hurt the poor more than it will help. And our favorite Black Republican, Jason, just made that same comment. So Taman, you're on the line. The floor is yours. Why are you saying, and why did you tweet us that helping, giving people slaving at McDonald's in retail, how does giving them a fair living wage hurting them?
Well, I think that you have to look at how economics works. I think that when you give somebody a raise, you have to earn a wage raise. It's just something that's not given to you. It's something that has to go based on your skill. It has to go based on the business's payroll. And if the business doesn't have that wage, it hurts more than it helps. It can be replaced. For example, if I work at McDonald's, if I'm an owner of McDonald's, if I want to replace you with a computer so people order their food like you do at Chili's, I could easily do that if I wanted to. If I'm a smaller business, for example, a smaller restaurant or whatever, yeah, the wage goes up. But if I don't have that money, I could easily cut the payroll, cut scheduling. Something else is going to have to make up for it. And it also goes with inflation. If you put a raise on the wage of the workers, then the prices are going to go up because the businesses are going to try to allocate the lost money.
I just wanted to say something with respect to inflation. I mean, and there may be a significant argument for why the minimum wage shouldn't be raised above a certain point for the reasons you point out, that, there is differences between people's skills and what they get paid to do certain things. But my biggest issue right now is that the minimum wage hasn't tracked inflation. You mentioned inflation. Inflation, because basically inflation is because we print more money. $1 today is worth less than what $1 was back in the 70s.
Got 'em.
But when we don't track minimum wage with inflation, then we have a situation where the minimum wage today, which is federally speaking, is $7.25. If it tracked with inflation, then the minimum wage would be $10.74. So my argument is, in some ways I do agree with you. Certain people, they didn't go to law school. They shouldn't get paid as much as I get paid because I'm a lawyer. But at the same time, they shouldn't get paid less than what they should be getting paid because the minimum wage hasn't tracked with inflation. So my thing is, at the very minimum wage has to be equivalent to what it would be in the 70s today, and that would make it $10.74.
Ooh, and she said your breath stinks.
Taman, I want to give Taman a chance to respond, then we'll get Jason in there, who I know probably wants to say something. Taman, did you have a response?
Well, yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily a response. It just goes to the allocation of what authority does government have over businesses' payrolls. I mean, that's something that you have to ask yourself. I mean, you guys know me. I'm a conservative. I don't want the government involved in my personal life. What involvement does the government have in a person, or what authority does the government have in a person's finances? I mean, a business is owned by a person. That person has the right to their finances. So what authority does the government have to pose a mandate on a private business?
Jason?
Hey, David, you should have seen the looks on our faces. Okay, I'm going to tell you something right here. As a fellow, I guess, I'm not sure if you're registered Republican, but let's use conservative as a title. I can't agree with you with this. What authority does government have? You sound like you're bordering on this sovereign citizen movement, okay? Government has complete purview and jurisdiction when it comes to regulation of commerce. To go back to what you were saying, though, about raising the minimum wage, I agree with you. And then this is one of these rare nexus of shared agreement between all of us. We should be tracking the minimum wage with inflation. Raising it up to $15 an hour is egregious. And how the hell is a small business going to keep up with that? Has anybody thought about that? I mean, a big corporation can do it. McDonald's and all this other stuff can do that. But no, I think that it'll be another nail in the coffin for small businesses. I'm going to say it right now. Affordable Care Act has been disastrous for a lot of small businesses. I mean, many people I know who have advised businesses on, they've been cutting hours, cutting wages, cutting positions, doing whatever they can so they don't have to comply with the mandate. If you tell them in New York State, oh, you've got to pay $15 an hour, I'm telling you, you're going to have a upswell of business migration out of the state as well as greater unemployment. And that's what I was saying earlier about raising the wage, particularly in this state, is not going to help people get out of poverty. It's going to help more, it's going to assist in greater poverty because those low-skilled jobs primarily are employed by, small businesses are the major employer, but those low-skilled jobs are in the small business sector.
I would like to jump in, and it's going to sound like I'm siding with Jason and Tamon, but I want to be very clear about something. Raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour is A, not a good idea, and B, ridiculous. Let's discuss why. Because in some place like Arizona, if you make $11 an hour, you can live a very comfortable life. So depending on what state you're in, the wage does not have to go up that high. To raise it to something about $9 to $10 an hour is a great idea. But if you raise it to $15 an hour, we're still not discussing or dealing with the issue of overpriced rent. Like in New York, in this area, the average cost of rent is $2,500 a month. It's not addressing that issue at all. And then also, the $15 wage increase is for fast food workers, places like McDonald's, Burger King. Which I think if you did that, even though I'm shaking on whether I think that they need that much of an increase, but McDonald's, Burger King, and pizza and all those places can afford it. McDonald's would have to raise the most expensive meal up by 63 cents. If they wanted to make back the money they lost with raising the minimum wage.
I mean, I'm just curious to see if the rest of the panel, obviously, and anybody who's listening and wants to call in, what happens if there was a proposal for a 2-tiered minimum wage, whereas that would be based on, I don't know, I guess maybe a combination of some formula that would determine essentially whether you're a small business or a large business. And we would say if you fall into this category, then you would have to pay a minimum wage of this. But if you fall into this category, then you'd have to pay a minimum wage of this. Or would that not work economically speaking? Because then it would create the same types of problems like with the Affordable Care Act, where people would be trying to lay people off or whatever so that they could fall into category A instead of B. Jason?
No, I agree with you because people do that. Well, business owners, let me not use the term people. What we get into the Citizens United designation there, right?
Right.
No, business owners already do that. And you're absolutely right. They do that with every other mandate and requirement is required by the federal government. People find a way, if they're C Corp, how to be an S Corp. If they got to do Affordable Health Care Act, they find some way where they don't have to do it. So even if you create a 2-tier system, they're going to find a way to allocate themselves into this area or the sector where the government mandate is less injurious to that particular party or business. So, no, absolutely. Stan, jump in.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. But and also the people who get hurt the most now are small businesses who, because they hired one additional person because they wanted to employ the community, now the government's like, oh, you're not a small business anymore. Pay us double.
Can I add something real quick just because I'm listening? I had a great conversation and everything. And it's interesting because I thought Stanley brought up a good point because he was talking about the cost of living in different states. I would, bring up the point to why there is such a big difference in cost of living across different states. But I would also add that let's take $15 an hour in New York City. Let's say you're making that. I think most people can make the argument that that's in New York City. If you're living in New York, that's not enough to even. We keep hearing this notion of to live off of. In New York City, $15 an hour is not enough to live off on.
That's about $30,000 a year.
So it's like, again, if you're making $11 or $12 or $13, there's going to be this allocation from other companies saying, well, why don't I get a raise? Why don't I get should I get a $7 raise too? Why does my raise only go up $2 or $3? Why everybody else went up $7? I mean, you will have, or, $7 or $6, $7, $8. So you have that, you're going to have that allocation. You're going to have that backlash. And I think, I personally believe that there's other ways because there's different balances of economics. There's different, in different states, some states are doing worse economically than others, and Kansas. The solution is let's raise this, let's raise that. Quite frankly, you guys know me, I'm a small government guy. I think lower taxes, less spending is a better way. But I mean, you're going to have that type of backlash with the $7 increase from one group of people compared to another.
Right, and I think, and that's why, and this is something that you'll agree with because it's a 10th Amendment argument. That's exactly why we have a federal minimum wage that's not $15 an hour, that as far as I'm concerned should be $10.75, which is the same as $7.25 adjusted for inflation. And then each individual state can decide on their own whether they want to go higher. New York City wants to go higher because the cost of living is higher there. They have the right to do that. They just can't fall below the $10.74 federal minimum, which, as I said, is just the $7.25 with an inflation adjustment.
Right. We have Miss Deborah on the line who would like to chime in about the wage debate. Good afternoon, Miss Deborah.
Yes. Listen, I just want to ask something because I was just sitting here thinking, if the people, for example, in McDonald's cannot get a $15 an hour wage and things continue to get worse, what would you have them do, and where would you have them go? Because I hear a lot of people talk about, well, these are young people, as if young people don't have needs. This whole ageism thing is getting on my nerves anyway, okay? Because everybody has to eat. Everybody needs to have a place to stay. Where would you have people go?
That's a very good question, Ms. Deborah. And again, guys, if you want to call in, the number is 212-650-6903. Just to add in, the average fast food worker is not just the regular teenager as we imagine. The average age is 27 right now?
28 years
28
old.
years old.
Worker, and they're the college graduates.
Exactly. And so think about it. If you have these 28-year-old adults, college grads, who have to pay back all this tuition, working 40 hours a week, and they cannot sustain, they cannot feed their family, then something needs to be done. Jason, did you want to respond to Ms. Deborah?
Well, I want to respond in this respect. No one here is assigning or ascribing to people who are working in these particular jobs that you should just be sort of, consigned to the netherworld of never being able to survive in the city. But we have to recognize something when it comes to this, okay? And this is going to get a little personal for me. My parents are immigrants. My father came here, started as a damn janitor, okay? Now, what he did, like millions of us do who come here, you acquire the skills in order to get a better job. Now, I'm not saying that everyone necessarily has an opportunity, and we need to make it accessible. We need to make the resources equitable and accessible to all people who want to achieve that. However, we should not get in the business of subsidizing people who don't want to achieve anything.
I mean, I feel like that might not be a fair assessment, because how do you know they don't want to achieve anything?
Saying. We don't know. We don't know. If we make the access to those resources more available and equitable, then that is the deciding factor. That's the deciding factor.
And I agree with you. We do have to go to break. But before we do, I agree with you there, Jason. But I just think that what do we do in the interim? What do we do in the meantime? Because we need to improve our education system. We need to make sure there's fair access for every child so that they can have upward mobility. But the thing is, what about their parents who can barely afford to feed them when they get home? Like, we have to do something right now. So, I mean, that's what I was saying. And guys, if you want to call in again, we're getting a lot of phone calls. This is the time to call in. The number is 212-650-6903. You can also tweet us at BeHeard_radio. And we're taking a quick break, but don't go anywhere, because we have more with the wage debate on Let Your Voice Be Heard.
My bass low.
Hey, y'all.
I ride low. She go low. My beat low. My bass low. I ride low.
We are back.
Are you singing? You're not singing?
Let Your Voice Be Heard radio.
No. Okay.
And you can call us at 212-650-6903. This is Stanley Fritz with Selena Hill, Alyssa Fuchs, and Jason
Eligio.
Yes, that's right.
Jason Eligio. And we are talking about the wage gap. And let me tell you something. If you want to fix America, pay me $100,000 a day, and I will fix all of our problems.
How will you do that, Stanley?
By drinking whiskey and playing video games.
And I believe that part. So we are back, guys. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard. We're talking about the wage debate. Very heated conversation, very heated discussion. I wanted to bring the conversation here. Earlier this year in January, I think it was 21 states actually did raise minimum wage. Alyssa brought that up, that all states should have the ability and the right to raise their wage accordingly. But the government, the federal government, has refused to act. Congress has refused to act. We know that President Obama wanted to raise the wage to, I think it was $10.75, and he made the proposal, but Republicans just didn't do anything. Why is it that, this is such a hot button issue, and it's something that the American people want? And if you survey them, why is it that Congress isn't acting?
Well, two reasons. One, because they're not going to do anything to work with the black guy. And two, because they're not going to do anything, cooperate with him in any way unless they absolutely have to. Because if you raise the wage, that's just another notch to his legacy. They don't want to do that.
So they rather hurt the American people than have President Obama succeed.
Yes, because then they can blame him for the problems like they've been doing for the last 7 years.
Blame Obama.
Right. But also you have to think out the alternatives, which is if Congress isn't going to act and the Congress isn't going to at least come up to 1074, the adjusted rate, which I keep repeating because it's where the minimum wage really should be as far as I'm concerned, then people are going to have to take other proposals. That's why I think it's so important to look at organizing that's going on. And this is an argument to be made that conservatives should agree with. If people get together and they lobby their employer to pay them more, and the employer says, yes, I'm going to pay you more. That's the free market. That's not the government stepping in and telling the employer what to do. If a CEO, like the guy at Gravity Payment, says, I want to take some of the money out of the profits that my company's making, and I want to cut my own salary, and I want to trickle down this money to my employees, then again, that's the free market. So, and those are proposals that conservatives should say, hey, yeah, that is the free market. And so if people want to do that, I may disagree with them personally, but I'm okay with that because it's not the government stepping in and doing it.
Right. No, Jason, did you want to say something?
No. All I was saying to myself is that, at the end of the day, we're talking about government intervention and the free market economy. But I think we're still losing the nugget of the discussion is really how practical or implementable is this sort of idea. I mean, once again, I would love to see the Congress implement something that tax the minimum wage to the realities of inflation in this country.
Right.
But once I am thoroughly concerned about the majority of businesses in this country. I think 75 to 80% of the businesses in this country are small businesses.
Right.
How can they actually sustain that? That's on my mind.
No, and that's a really good question and point to make. But I also wanted to point out that since the recession from 2009 to 2012, the Economic Policy Institute found that average income for the top 1% has grew 36.8%, whereas for the rest of us, it's been falling by 0.4%. So I mean, like, I understand like the arguments made on the other side of half, but we still have this ever increasing and ever widening wage gap. And one way to address that, from my opinion as well, but this is what I think, is by raising them and giving them a fair wage.
Another way to address that is another thing that Republicans don't want to do because redistribution is scary or something. But as you know, almost 99%, or maybe you don't know, almost 99% of the wealth in this country is held by the top 1% and 2% of people in this country, whereas the bottom 98% of us hold only about 1% of the wealth. So if you really want to talk about how to solve the problem of income inequality without necessarily having to raise the wage higher than the adjusted inflation rate, then you could say, well, right now we have 7 tax brackets. 7. Back when Ronald Reagan was president, there was like 10 tax brackets. Back when Eisenhower, a Republican, mind you, was president, there was something like 15 tax brackets. And when you had that many tax brackets and the aggregation was done in a much more reasonable and fair way compared to it is now. Look at the highest tax bracket now. It's $433,000 and above. That's it, and above. So you could be making $4 billion a year, and you're paying the same in taxes as somebody who makes $400,033 because there's no aggregation. And so then what you do is if you make more tax brackets and you re-aggregate it and you change the percentages for everybody, then people at the very, very top are, yes, going to be paying more, but somebody who makes $400,333 is actually going to be paying less, and you have to re-aggregate the whole entire tax bracket from the top down. And then you'll grow the economy from the bottom up if you do that, because you'll have more people in the bottom will be paying less taxes. So that's another way that you can deal with this that does involve government intervention, but we can't do that either because God forbid we raise taxes on the wealthiest people in the country. And I'm not talking about the corporate tax code because that's a whole other animal, as I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were chiming in about the effective tax rate for corporations, which is still number 1 in the world, in developed world, whatever that means.
No, I'm talking
right?
about the individual
You're talking about
tax code.
Individual tax bracket. I mean, you're absolutely right. Once again, though, it wouldn't offset the issue of wage inequality or wage injustice, if you want to put it that way, because that money would have to go back into the government coffers, and how would they distribute that?
Right. So we addressed some solutions. We talked about what some private business owners are doing. Melissa just gave another example of something that could be done that could help the increasing wage gap. But I wanted to know, what do you guys think everyone should receive, like the same wage increase? And if not, how do we create a rate to help for people who work in these wages?
With these wages, so the question is why they work in these places, because there are not enough jobs, and the jobs that are out that people don't have the experience for. So what the government could do is a two-pronged strategy. 1, raise the wage. 2, inflation rates, $10.74 an hour, and then also invest in more training for people to get these things. So one of the things that we do at my job, We Act for Environmental Justice, is that we offer these worker trainings, and we get community members certified in OSHA and other construction certifications, and then we help them find jobs. So, and these are people in the community who want to work but did not necessarily have the experience, but now they can go to a construction company and say, I have these certifications, hire me, and that can happen. And that's just one thing that we do, and we can't do as much as we like to because it's a strenuous process.
Right. And listen, this also sort of goes back to our first segment, which is the number one factor, I'm pretty sure, in how much money you're going to make over the course of your life is your level of education. And so education is supremely important. And yes, people who have educations are working in some of these, they're underemployed, as we'll call it. They're employed, but they're not working in a job that meets their education level. And that is a separate issue that we could spend a whole segment on. But ultimately, the point is, whether your education is more in a skills job, such as a vocational school, or whether your education is more the higher level of education you have, whether it's a regular course of education or a skills course of education through vocational training that lets you do those kinds of skill-based jobs, the higher you're able to earn. And so the focus has to come back to how much money the government is spending on putting into education and education standards and getting people educated and educated in the jobs that exist today, not the jobs that existed in the 1970s, because I think that's a big way, on top of the things we've already mentioned about the minimum wage, in increasing people's wages over time.
Jason, final words?
No,
solutions?
I'm on board. Solutions. Okay, once again, we're going to reiterate this. Increase the minimum wage to 1074 as it would be federally implemented. The second part of it has already been touched on. We need to reintroduce vocational training. When you talk about college graduates who are serving in McDonald's or Starbucks or whatever the heck they're doing, I assure you they studied in something that has no applicability in this economy. And that is the problem. You talk about OSHA. I'm OSHA guy. I got an engineering degree, all that nonsense, right? But I still had to do OSHA. I still had to do hazardous materials and all that good stuff. I have technical skills that are useful and employable. That is the problem when it comes to people who are overeducated in those jobs. When it comes to people who are not as educated, the issue is access. They need access. But I assure you many of those people can achieve it if they want it.
Yeah, and just to respond to that really quick, and sometimes that means, and I'll give you an example. Right now, for every for every 10 nurses, for every one nurse, there's like 30 jobs. But for every one lawyer job, there's 30 lawyers that want to fill it. So it's also about going into fields where jobs exist. Right now, the best field you can go into is nursing because there's lots and lots of jobs and there's not a lot of people that want to fill them. And one of the worst jobs you could go into, I hate to say it, is being a lawyer because there's no jobs and there's lots and lots of lawyers that want to fill them. So that's another big thing that we have to focus on.
Pay Alyssa to be your lawyer.
Well, speaking of healthcare, that industry is actually one of the fastest growing industries in America right now, but it just so happens to be that many of the workers are making $10 an hour, especially if they're taking care of the elderly or the sickly. And these are, that job, even though we don't value it in society, that's something that we all can personally relate to. I mean, I want someone who loves their job, who's productive and motivated to be caring for me if I would ever need that type of care, but yet we don't pay them. And I just wanted to end the segment with this by saying wage stagnation and income inequality, it destabilizes our economy and our democracy. When people aren't making enough money to spend and put that money back into the economy, it hurts all of us. So I think that with the Fair Wage Act, I've been supportive of the movement from the beginning. They've made a lot of progress since 2012, which is when this the fast food worker strike first came about, and now it has grown into a global movement. And we've seen so many progress in 21 states. Starting this year, they all increased their minimum wage because these workers weren't afraid to go walk out of their fast food restaurants, walk out of McDonald's, come on the front lines and say, we demand a fair living wage. And they're getting it state by state. The government has, the federal government has not acted. We see that they're not acting, but we can act on a personal basis. Employers can act. And I think that if even if you wanted to act, you could join the movement yourself. They're always striking, and you can give money and donate to their cause. But on that note, I'm going to wrap it up. We are going to go on a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about how you can get Cuban rum, some Cuban cigars, and everything else that's good in Cuba. Right here on Let Your Voice Be Heard.